11 shocking diplomatic immunity and privileges. Diplomatic immunity was established in the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations of 1961 as a way to ensure the efficient and effective performance of diplomats in their official missions on behalf of their governments. These reciprocal rules come in the form of immunity and privileges that diplomats are entitled to in the host country, and that give ambassadors and consuls a certain aura of untouchableness. But do you know exactly what those immunities and privileges are? And what happens when diplomats abuse them and use them for their own benefit? Join us today as we explore 11 shocking immunities and privileges you never knew diplomats had, and see how some agents have used them for their own gain or to avoid criminal charges. From drug trafficking to murder to modern-day slavery, there seemed to be no end to the crimes that some agents or their families have gotten away with thanks to their diplomatic status. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe and give us a like to support our channel. And remember to hit the bell icon to be notified of our upcoming videos. Number 11. Immunity to arrest, detention, and prosecution. The most important type of immunity diplomats and their direct families enjoy is the total immunity to the jurisdiction of the receiving or host state. This means that diplomatic agents cannot be arrested by the police in the host state, even if they are in flagrant violation of local or international laws. They can't be detained either, even if they obviously committed a crime and even if the police has all the evidence to support it. Finally, they can't be prosecuted in any court for any crime whatsoever, not even if they killed someone. It's no joke, and it has happened several times before. In 1967, a Burmese diplomat shot and killed his cheating wife. He was arrested but soon let loose because of his immunity, and he was gone long before the case was solved. In 1984, agents from the Libyan embassy in London shot and killed a British policewoman who was making rounds on an anti-Gaddafi demonstration. The British police actually had to help all the diplomatic agents out of the country, even though the latter had killed one of their own. Finally, very recently on October 2019, diplomatic immunity made headlines as an American diplomat's wife named Anne Sekulis was involved in a hit-and-run that killed 19-year-old Harry Dunn in the UK. After claiming diplomatic immunity, she was allowed to leave the country, not answering for a crime, even though the British government requested repeatedly that the US government revoke her immunity. Number 10. Immunity of the embassy building and its properties. Buildings, vehicles, archives, and diplomatic communications are all immune to inspection and intervention by the host state's police force. This effectively makes the embassy and its consulates an extended part of the foreign state, so going inside uninvited would be like the Canadian police crossing the border into the US making demands. The host state has an obligation to protect the integrity of the foreign embassy against any form of damage or attack. The police or armed forces of the host country are not allowed to enter the embassy, except during an emergency and solely to save human lives. This is precisely why we see agents running and dashing towards the embassy in many action movies, and agents are always quick to self-identify their credentials and desperate to get in, because once they're in, they are protected from any host state's pursuit. Number 9. Diplomats aren't obliged to give evidence as witnesses. This means that even if a diplomat is a witness to a crime, and even if they are themselves the victims of a crime, they cannot be forced to testify in court. They can if they want to, but they're not obliged to do so. Let's say that an ambassador and his wife go out for a couple of drinks. He gets drunk and runs over a pedestrian and makes a run for it, and no one but his wife saw what happened. Even if the foreign county were to waive the ambassador's immunity in order to allow him to be tried in the receiving state, other members of the mission that witnessed the event cannot be called to testify in court. Number 8. They are exempt from all personal, public, or military obligations mandatory to the regular population. There are many different laws in different countries, and some include obligations like mandatory military service by a certain age, the requirement to participate in certain public events, etc. Well, diplomats, and most importantly their families, are exempt from any and all such obligations. If you're a diplomat and your son goes to a school where pre-military training class is mandatory, he can definitely skip that class if he wants to. Number 7. They are exempt of almost all taxes. Except for those taxes which are already included in the price of some goods and services, diplomats are not required to pay any form of tax in the host state. It is estimated that in cities like Ottawa, there are unpaid tax bills that would easily reach millions of dollars, if not for diplomatic immunity. Although the tax exemption is only intended for all activities related to their diplomatic duties, there have been cases where this benefit has been used by some diplomats to evade taxes. For instance, they could buy a house, invest their money, or buy an expensive car and not have to pay property capital gains or luxury taxes. Number 6. They don't have to pay customs duties. Not only are diplomats exempt from paying taxes, but they also don't have to pay customs duties either. They can import whatever they want into the host country as long as it's allowed by law, or as long as nobody finds out, without paying a single dime when doing so. We've covered more than half of the immunities and benefits we would have if we were appointed as our country's representative, and we've already seen some pretty nice perks that go with the position. These top 5 coming up next are far better, and they're also a lot more frequently subject to abuse. Number 5. Personal inviability. Personal inviability is a sort of immunity that includes categories we've mentioned earlier, such as being immune to arrest, detention, and prosecution, but it also includes immunity to being inspected by the police or other authority in the host state. So there's no empty your pockets on the table for diplomats. They could be holding an unregistered firearm or even drugs in their pockets, and a police officer couldn't search them, not even a pat-down. Number 4. Immunity from civil suits. Not only are diplomats immune to criminal prosecution, but also to civil suits. While there are exceptions, such as cases related to personal property or services provided by the diplomatic agent outside their official duties, several diplomats have tried to use this type of immunity to settle some pretty bad breakups. In 1989, Mozambique's UN representative tried to use his diplomatic immunity to avoid paying his ex-wife the settlement, which he lost. Sheikh Walid Jafalis managed to get appointed St. Lucia's International Maritime Organization representative and tried to use the immunity against civil lawsuits to get out of a high-profile divorce from his wife, who wanted no less than a cut of his $4 billion and an allowance of £200,000 for cocktail dresses and handbags. Number 3. Immunity against search of residence and personal belongings. Just as the embassy itself, a diplomat's residence or vehicle cannot be searched by law enforcement officers in the receiving state, even if they have more than enough evidence to justify a warrant. In fact, no court can even issue a warrant to search the property of a diplomat at all. Combined with the above immunity against local jurisdiction and the tax exemptions, a diplomat could rent a luxury apartment in Manhattan, stay there for as long as he wants, not pay the landlord a single cent, and he doesn't risk being evicted or touched at all. He can then leave the country as if nothing ever happened and move on to their next destination. And that's not a hypothetical case either. It happens frequently, particularly in Manhattan. Number 2. Freedom of movement and travel. All diplomats are free to move throughout the entire extension of the receiving state without restrictions and with no exceptions. This includes moving in and out of militarized zones, conflict zones, and anywhere they feel necessary in order to perform their duty as a diplomatic agent. They can also park their diplomatic vehicles wherever they see fit. The area around the United Nations in New York has become pretty much a diplomatic parking lot, generating hundreds of thousands of parking summons that, if not for immunity, would have cost diplomats an estimated $16 million in 1997 alone. No wonder it's so hard to find a good spot in Manhattan. Number 1. Freedom of communication and the diplomatic bag. Diplomats are allowed to communicate with whomever they want, whenever they want, and through whatever means they want, without any restrictions and with total privacy. While they may obviously use telecommunications, they are also entitled to make use of physical mail and a special diplomatic courier who carries something called a diplomatic bag. This bag has total immunity against inspection and cannot ever be rejected. It cannot be opened, x-rayed, or handled in any way, and there are no restrictions regarding its size, shape, or weight. You could ship anything from a letter or document to an office desk to construction equipment if you need or want to. This is why the diplomatic bag is the holy grail of smugglers. They have even been used to traffic people, gold, works of art, cocaine, you name it. And that's only the ones we come to know about because of anonymous tip-offs and intel that allow breaking, in certain cases, the bag's diplomatic immunity because all the rest of the diplomatic bags have come and gone without control, so there's no telling what has already passed under the radar. After seeing these incredible benefits and immunities that diplomats enjoy and how easy it is for them to be abused, do you think that they're being used to ensure the efficient and effective performance of their official missions on behalf of their governments? Or are they, more often than not, being used to avoid being liable for crimes committed abroad? Wouldn't you say that people like Harry Dunn's family deserve to see justice prevail, and that all the Sakulas out there should have their immunity revoked to answer for their crimes? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and while you do, remember to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell for more upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.